They're the most dominant, clear choice number one team in the entire nation. No, Daniel, I'm not talking about Ohio State. I'm not talking about the Bulldogs. I'm clearly talking about the best team ever assembled in college football history, because that's what I've been told Texas is, Daniel. Texas is elite of elite of elite. Are they? We talk about who we're playing next. Locked On Bulldogs.
You are Locked On Bulldogs, your daily podcast on the Georgia Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Locked On Bulldogs podcast. He is Clint. I am Daniel. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel, FanDuel.com, the official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Bulldogs and Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. Thank you to all the everydayers who are here. Shout out to all of you. You make this podcast great. You are the reason that it is fun to record, even in a year when Georgia's not dominating opponents the way that we wish that they were. Even in a year where we're nervous about more games than we are excited about, just to be honest.
Yep.
It's still fun to be here every day talking about the Bulldogs. This podcast is for fans, by fans. Clint and I are Georgia fans, first and foremost. That's who we are. And we talk about the Dogs the way that you do here on the Locked On Bulldogs podcast, your team every day. So, Clint, it's time to transition. It's Tuesday, which means we are shifting to the next opponent. We're done talking about Mississippi State. We're done lamenting about the things that went poorly. We're done celebrating the things that went well. And now we have fully shifted our focus on to Texas, the Texas Longhorns, who you mentioned are kind of the darling of college football this year. I'm not going to lie to you, Clint. When the new AP poll came out, I was shocked that Texas is still the number one team in the country. After Oregon gets the win over Ohio State, the best win of any team in college football, maybe save for Alabama's win over Georgia. Like, how does that Oregon team not go to number one? That's how highly these voters think of the Texas Longhorns. They are obviously 6-0. They do get a win over a ranked Oklahoma team at the time last weekend. They obviously demoralized Michigan in week 2 of the regular season this year. And they haven't looked back. Arch Manning started a couple of games. I'm pretty sure that has just only added to the hype train that is the Texas Longhorns. But now Quinn Ewers is back. Steve Sarkisian is in his bag. They are stacked and loaded all the way across the board. So where do you want to start in talking about this Texas team, Clint?
I want to start on the offensive side of the ball, Daniel.
Sure.
That's where I want to start, because that is where Texas is apparently the best in the nation, metrically, explosively. Steve Sarkisian himself, noted offensive-minded guy, and when I say noted offensive guy, that's not me slighting him. I trust Steve Sarkisian, the offensive play caller, more than I do about every single other offensive-minded head coach in college football, and I'm not lying with that. That he can cook on that side of the ball, and he's been doing that quite well. Talk about where this Texas team ranks, and then give you a second and third kind of where they fit in between two teams that we know relatively well. If you look at total yards, Texas is 10th, top 10 in total yards. Rushing, they are somewhere near 40th. They're down on that passing yards. They are up there. Total yards there. They're doing quite fine, quite great. Yards per play, 7 yards per play, yards per game, close to 500. The last couple of games, they've seen a slight drop off because of the competition. Oklahoma Red River rivalry, a little bit difficult for them to get everything going. They did handle that game quite well. The defense has shown out. We're going to get to them in a hot minute. But with the offensive side of the ball, Daniel, they still got playmakers at receiver and they still got playmakers at quarterback. The running backs have taken a hit, but I want to start here and just maybe compare them because I think people get lost sometimes. You hear Quinn Ewers, you hear these guys on the edge, you hear these young recruits coming into Texas, and you hear Steve Sarkisian, and you don't understand where they fall. Just to let you know where they are total offense, passing, like I said, somewhere in the top 12. Georgia, we are ahead of them in passing yards offensively. And total yards, they fit somewhere for me in the range of the last couple of games. Clemson and Tennessee and Indiana are the teams that they're associated with. Now, I want to start with this. I want to start with Clemson because I think Clemson is showing us just how good they are. Daniel, it's going to be Miami or Clemson, and this just in, it's not or Miami. Okay,
it's going to be Clemson.
It's going to be Clemson because Miami is fraudulent because Marcus can't coach. Clemson's going to win the ACC. They're going to go into the playoff. They're going to be top 4 team in the playoff, and they have an offense and Cade Klubnik who knows how to throw the football. Heisman caliber after week 1 and 2. All of a sudden, he's showing out in that. Texas is closer, I think, to in between Tennessee and Clemson for me as it pertains to play calling and statistics. Now, statistics, Tennessee has that, but play calling, it's gimmicky. Josh Hoople, if you get that system down, you can corner them and the game's over, a la Arkansas and a whole bunch of other teams. Clemson, however, shows you that they were down early or it was a dogfight for them early this week. They came out and blew the doors off later in the game because they could run with a great running game and they can pass without notable wide receivers, but with a quarterback who knows what he's doing in a system he knows what he's doing. Daniel, when I say they're a little mix, they're a little column A, a little column B of Tennessee and Clemson. How do you feel about that as a comp?
I'll be honest, I don't feel great about it. I don't hate the comparisons that you make in terms of style, the comparisons that you make in terms of the way that they like to do things. I will say this. Texas is unequivocally the best offense in college football, bar none.
Yes. That was not in between. Like they're one of those teams is better. I'm just saying it's a little mixed. They are the best offense in college football.
They are. If you look at any advanced metric, like yards per play, like drive success rate, like offensive efficiency, like points per drive, like all of the things that we reference on this show, the things that we tend to think, and apparently if you listen to Kirby Smart's press conference, the things that Kirby Smart tends to think are strong indicators of like what is real in terms of measuring things. Texas is 1 or 2 in the country in every single one of those metrics. They are ahead of Georgia in literally every single one of those metrics. And so offensively, Texas is elite. And what makes them elite is they have a quarterback who is better than Clemson's quarterback, better than Tennessee's quarterback by a mile, who is throwing to wide receivers who are better than Tennessee's wide receivers, better than Clemson's wide receivers by a mile. They have the best offensive line in college football, and they're on their 3rd and 4th string running backs. And oh, by the way, the 3rd and 4th string running backs are running for 100, 150 yards each per game. They're doing just fine. Texas is moving the ball at will. Quintravion Wisner, 118 yards against Oklahoma. Quinn Ewers only passed for 200 in that game, but he's 20 of 29 for 200. They were just surgical in the way that they dismantled the Oklahoma defense, an Oklahoma defense that isn't that bad. They're not that awful. Texas is a really good offense. Michigan, that's another legitimate defense that Texas has played this year. Texas doesn't belong on the ain't played nobody. Now, come back in segments 2 and 3. We're going to talk about what they haven't seen this year. But in terms of the Texas offense, they have been tested and they have still proven themselves to be, in my mind, unequivocally the best offense in all of college football. They don't have any holes. There are no gaping areas where maybe you say they lack star power at the wide receiver position.
Yeah.
I think they've got plenty of dudes
They got
there
dudes,
that
though.
can get it done. I don't think there's any holes on this Texas offense. I don't think there's anywhere that you can go to try to exploit them. I will be fascinated to hear what you think the best matchup will be for Georgia. And we'll talk about things like that and more right after this.
Hey, Bowling fans, it's time to recognize the Roy Player of the Week. So far this season, we pulled over $10,000 to support players on Roy. Microdeposits lead to massive change. With the Roy app, you can direct your support to athletes you love, ensuring that all funds go to specific players you choose. Unlike collectives, you know exactly where your support is going, and you even receive exclusive content like personal videos and updates after the season. The best part is risk-free. If the athlete transfers, it doesn't make the delivery, the content, you get your money back. This week, we're supporting Nate Frazier, who just pitched in $100, and I'd love for you to join me and make every $10 difference. Let's show Frazier the love, keep him connected to our school. Remember, pay today, celebrate tomorrow. Your support sets up the team for success. Plus, don't miss out on Roy's exciting giveaway. Win 2 tickets to any game in November. Just download, or a game in November. Just download Roy, create an account, enter referral code LOCKEDONCollege, and you're entered. Already on Roy, any contribution to an athlete's campaign also gets you entered automatically. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited. Download Roy now. Join the NIL game with no subscriptions, no fees. Be sure to check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and X at Roy_return on you for more info. Support the players, change the game.
So, Clint, we talked about the Texas offense. Before we transition to the other side of the ball, the Texas defense, I'm curious. You mentioned, did you say this to me or did you say this on the podcast? It's all running together right now, Clint.
It's a lot.
I'm not going to lie. There's a bit of a haze. You mentioned this week Texas propensity to throw the deep ball. They do like to take shots downfield. It's part of Sark's offense. Quinn Ewers certainly has it. They've got the playmakers and wideouts to do it. You mentioned a little bit more zone coverage. This might have been Saturday night. You mentioned this. A little bit more zone coverage from Georgia. Maybe a little bit more too high look. So you got man on the outside, and you're playing a little too high safety over the top, trying to protect the sidelines against the deep throws. I submit to you, Clint, can Georgia do that? I think they're going to get run all over if they do that. I think Texas is just going to run it down our throat if that's the defense we try to play. I think Georgia's got to try to do the terrifyingly scary thing and do what they always do, which is make a team one-dimensional, try to commit to stop the run, and try to make a team beat them in obvious passing situations over the top. What say you?
The games Texas has passed to set up the run, Daniel. That's their game. They have passed to set up the run. They go through Ewers. Ewers can scramble as well to get out there. The Michigan game, the most likely. So the games I'm looking at, I'm going to take Colorado State off. They're trash. I'm taking UTSA out. They're more than trash. I'm taking Mississippi State out. Our offense did well against the defense. We're not talking about that's what we're talking about. That's the side of the ball we're talking about right now is the offense for Texas. Okay. I'm taking those out. I'm taking Louisiana Monroe out, which leaves us with 2 games, Michigan and Oklahoma. In both those games, there was zero zip chance that anybody was stopping the pass the entire time. Michigan gave up that first big play on the first drive passing. They were down big early, kind of snowballed from there, and then they ran after that. I think that if you set up Quinn Ewers, I think Quinn Ewers is such the dude. And Steve Sarkisian's offense is this. This is what I mean. It's got a little Tennessee in it. Not a lot, just a little Tennessee. That they want to take shots downfield. They want to take the risk. They want to take the chance. And if you take that away and make them run against our linebackers that we've mentioned, eyes get lost. No, there is no doubting that. But if you're just reading and reacting and going, I think that bodes well for us.
So you still like dropping safeties back in coverage, letting our linebackers go one-on-one, trying to stop the run, trusting the interior of that defensive line. You still like that as an approach?
It's been fine. If we played
the outside run defense has not been fine.
Okay,
but
that's a whole nother thing. That's a whole other thing. But that's not where Texas has done majority of their work. It's been inside zone. They've done a majority of their work. They've got a couple RPOs in that, but they want to do inside zone, and then they want to take some shots over the top. I think if you limit those, if you make them march, which teams that march against Georgia don't have nearly the success as other teams do. It's blown coverages, blown assignments, it's big plays. That's what gets you. I think if we limit those, and I think that's going to be Malachi Starks, I think that's going to be Smart's entire messaging. I like our linebackers. I like our defensive line who's been wreaking havoc. I like the coming on of McLeod. I like Ingram Dawkins, the coming on. If you give me those two interior and less Chaz on the outside, then I'm happy.
I hear what you're saying. This Texas offensive line, though, is formidable, Clint. This Texas offensive line is not just as good as Georgia has played. It is as good as Georgia will play all year. And so it is a big ask. It's a big ask to see it happen. But I do agree that you gotta try to make teams march down the field and drive against you. I just kind of think this Texas team doesn't have much problem doing that. Either way, this Texas offense is real dang good, y'all. Like they're really, really, really good. Better than Tennessee, better than Alabama, better than Ole Miss. By far the best offense that Georgia will play this season. By the way, Georgia's offense, statistically, in a lot of these categories, better than all three of the teams that I just mentioned as well.
Yes.
So, two pretty good offenses, which brings me, Clint, to the Texas defense. I said Texas does not belong on the ain't played nobody list, right? They have played people. They've played people. But they ain't played no offense.
No, Daniel, let me tell you this
You went through the list and you reduced the games to Oklahoma and Michigan.
Okay, go ahead.
Them ain't no offenses, Clint. There ain't no offenses represented among Oklahoma, and especially that week 2 Michigan team, y'all. Don't forget what we were looking at that week 2. We were starting that poor little kid that recovered from leukemia or whatever. Like it was like a Make-A-Wish situation. I legitimately believe that somebody went in to Jim Harbaugh's old office and was like, "Hey, we got this kid and he wants to play quarterback for Michigan. So this is last wish." That Davis Warren kid was playing quarterback. Michigan did not have any sort of an offense whatsoever. None whatsoever. Oklahoma does not have any sort of an offense whatsoever. Texas has not played anybody.
No.
On the offensive side of the ball that even remotely resembles this Georgia offense, Clint.
No, not at all. I mean, UTSA has Kennesaw State is who they beat, and it was 28-16. Texas State, I'm sorry, they had another win against, a nobody as well. But East Carolina, Rice, Texas, those aren't teams that you can consider at all. Mississippi State, you saw what they were, and you might say, well, hey, that's an offense that put points on us. Well, again, 14 points. We already talked about that ad nauseum. Colorado State hasn't recovered since a long time ago. Michigan doesn't have a quarterback, can't pass on anything, and Oklahoma doesn't have anybody to pass on. They haven't played nobody offensively, Daniel, and they haven't played anybody that has a quarterback that's competent whatsoever, or wide receivers like we have. Now we're rolling in one of our best games, Carson Beck, coming off of an Alabama game, coming off of an Auburn game, coming off of Mississippi State game, in which he balled out and showed out, and now all of a sudden he's in the top performers in the SEC yards per attempt, completion percentage. That's who Carson Beck is. So we might be saying to ourselves, yes, Texas' best offense we've ever had. I said this to end, maybe on the overreaction I said this. Maybe not. I don't know. If Texas wants to go toe-to-toe, blow for blow, haymaker for haymaker, let's go. Let's go. Because that defense don't know anything.
Yeah, I mean, and just before we get into sort of more big picture thoughts, maybe in the third segment, let me start here that I think this matchup for the Georgia offense is actually really favorable.
Oh, yeah.
Like, Georgia has kind of quietly, and much to the chagrin of many Georgia fans, kind of found their identity on offense. And ironically, Clint, Do you remember how Mike Bobo's the worst? And do you remember why he's the worst?
Oh, because he can't score points, Daniel.
He just runs the draw on third and long. Like he just this Georgia team ain't concerned about running the ball whatsoever.
Nah.
This Georgia team has figured out who they are offensively. This offensive line can pass protect as well as any group in the country. Carson Beck can read a defense, and these wide receivers are coming into their own. You saw it. You've seen it pretty much every time the Georgia offense gets cooking. It's not the ground game. It's not what's happening on the ground. It is Carson Beck going 5 wide and putting people in compromised positions in terms of coverage matchups.
Yep. Finding
mismatches because he's got time in the pocket and delivering the ball down the field. That's what Georgia wants to do. Yep. Now, this Texas defense, if they are anything, Clint, they are stout in the middle. Like they are ready to go toe-to-toe with you, which is why Oklahoma did not have a prayer in that game, because that's all they can do. Because Michael Hawkins Jr. can't throw the ball. He's not Carson Beck. He can't read a defense. He can't do any of that nonsense.
No.
All they can do, all they want to do is run the ball. They could not do that against the Texas defense. That's why even when Quinn Ewers threw an interception on the opening drive, Texas wasn't worried. Oklahoma wasn't going to score no points in that game.
No.
They came out of there with 3 points that they got in the first quarter, and then they didn't do a dang thing after that. That's what the Texas defense is set up to stop. Well, guess what? Georgia's not trying to do that.
We're not playing that game. You want to do a run game? Screen game for 5 yards to the outside is our run game right now up the middle. ETN 100% and Frazier are outside run guys, and then screen game 5 yards is an inside run game for us.
You can complain about that, Georgia fans, all you want. Like Georgia should be able to line up around the football. Georgia needs to be able to line up. Whatever. I don't care. That's fine. You might be right. In this game, it is a very favorable matchup for the Georgia offense, who we are versus who they are, which I think, if nothing else, proves for an interesting situation that could be upon us in Austin. We'll talk more about that right after we come back from these.
These are, in fact, FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch on the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view play-by-play, so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. No, over at FanDuel.com. FanDuel, the official sportsbook of Locked On Bulldogs, Locked On Podcast. Where Daniel and I use them every single time when we have locks this week, and we give out the over-under, and we give out that point spread, which is now taken up at 3.5 now on most places, and the point spread being somewhere 55.5 is going to fluctuate a little bit. It's going to be interesting to see where we give out some locks, because we just gave you a whole lot of reasons these offenses are coming in geared to go. 55 points don't seem like a great amount. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, the place that we go for all of our locks. Get over there right now. Make every moment more.
But Daniel, you say, and I can hear you.
No, they're yelling.
You come right through the headphones. Don't worry. But Daniel, you say Texas is #1 in America in passing yards per game allowed. Only 126 passing yards per game allowed. How can you, with a straight face, sit there and say that Georgia's passing game is the favorable matchup that Texas's defense is built to stop the run, that Georgia is going to rely on Carson Beck, and that's exactly what they want to do, that's a favorable matchup? It feels like the exact opposite situation, Clint. I don't think we can state enough for the people.
No, we can't.
How important it is for you to recognize who Texas has played this year and who they have not played. Okay? These offenses cannot, and I repeat, cannot throw the football. Like,
not that they don't know it's against the rules. Like that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is when they attempt to,
Yes.
It is a practice. It is an action by which negative outcomes are almost guaranteed.
Okay. It's not that they don't care for it.
No,
It's
no.
that they physically cannot do it. It's like, it's not that I don't want to fly.
Correct. Yep.
It's that I can't.
It's that
You understand?
we are not built to do that thing.
Yeah. So I'm sure Sharon Moore and Michigan would love to pass the ball.
Gosh, they would die, Daniel.
Yeah. They can't. See?
No.
They can't do that thing. Oklahoma had to bench their prodigy quarterback they let Dylan Gabriel walk so that they could keep.
Fire Venables.
That's a fireable offense.
I don't
that
know.
Right
Oklahoma
there
fan.
is a fireable offense.
He should have been let go.
They let Dylan Gabriel walk so they could keep a guy that they had to bench to put in a guy that is in no way ready, who's got some grit and toughness and some moxie to him, but he's a runner. He's not really a thrower at this point. Texas has not played like Mississippi State is the best passing offense that Texas has played by a lot. And Mississippi State's passing offense 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, whenever that game was nowhere near, was a shadow of its current self. And that's not an indication of, that's because they have progressed.
Yes.
Because they've gotten better.
Yes.
Texas hasn't played an offense that is capable of throwing the ball yet. Georgia passed for 459 yards last week. Georgia is an offense that is more than ready to spread you out.
Yep.
And say, these 5 guys are going to horseshoe the quarterback and we'll be fine.
And now hold on, Daniel. You mentioned the offensive line not being particularly great, except what's the one thing that they have done exceptionally well?
Well, they can't move anybody in the run game, Clint. Okay. They're going to hold on the perimeter when we try to get outside, Clint.
Sure, that's going to happen. But
they can form a pocket and give Carson Beck some time to operate. When Carson Beck has thrown interceptions this year, when he's made ill-advised throws, which he's done, inconsistency. We talked about it yesterday. Go listen. When Carson Beck's done that this year, it has not usually been because he's been under duress. The offensive line has largely performed well in passing situations. And so, yes, Texas is number 1 in the country in passing yards per game allowed at 126 per game. Check back with me on Sunday and see if they're still in that top spot. I'm just here to tell you that Texas defense is built to stop the run.
Yes.
Which is why the fact that they've matched up against running offenses exclusively this year, with the exception of maybe some of the, the Division II teams or the, like the lower
that we don't know anything about.
That's a very favorable thing for a 6-0 Texas team. That's a very favorable thing for this Texas defense because, they've allowed some rushing yards, but the amount of rushing yards that they allowed to Michigan compared to the amount of rushing yards that Michigan typically gets in a football game, you see that this Texas defense is still built to stop the run. That's who they are. Georgia's built to throw the ball, not to run the ball, much to the dismay of Georgia fans this year. But I'm telling you that on Saturday night in Austin,
NASCAR's in town, Daniel.
Let me just, no, they are. Somebody's in town. Formula One or whatever it is. I don't know.
Whatever. Formula One. Sorry.
Are you emotionally ready? We've had enough X's and O's. We've had enough of the numbers and the stats. Let's get real. This is a podcast for fans. Do you have the constitution for a shootout on Saturday night? Be honest with yourself and the people here.
I was dead inside Alabama, Daniel. I went to the brink. Mm-hmm. I stared into the abyss, and the abyss stared back at me, and I didn't like what it said, Daniel. That's between me and the abyss right now. I'm going to keep that private, okay? But I think that experience,
Between me and the abyss.
I think that experience gave me some perspective. And truth be told, I'm here for it, because why I'm here for it is, if you're telling me in a shootout that you need a sack, a turnover, or a timely, well coached series going down,
Okay. Yeah, one
give
defensive
me
stop.
Kirby. You need one stop defensively.
Yeah.
Give me Kirby Smart. And so I'm here for it.
That's good for you. I'm happy for you. I genuinely am happy for you. This has been the Locked On Bulldogs podcast, your team every day. We will be back tomorrow and all of the rest of this week. You know, we got plenty to say about this game. We got plenty to talk about this matchup. We might have a little Texas crossover coming later in the week. Stay tuned for that. He's Clint. I'm Daniel, and we'll see you guys next time.